Africa is currently experiencing a very high level of urbanization. Okay, and this is, I mean, as other continents has experienced before, just like Latin America, this is a process that nobody can stop. And so we have to face this process, and we have to deal with this process and deal with the problems that this process, I mean, this process means, of course, it's not an easy process. What's going to happen is that Africa is going to be even more urbanized in the next coming years and decades. And the bulk of the urban growth will be concentrated both in Africa in the next 20 years, 20, 30 years, both in Africa and in Asia. Okay, so we have to face this problem in Africa in particular. I would say that there are two main characteristics of the process of urbanization in Africa. The first one is that it is de-linked with industrialization as it happened in other continents. And the second one, and this is common to many places, it is involving quite high levels of poverty and inequalities. These are the two main characteristics. One of the main challenges is to address inequalities in cities. Okay? To address inequalities in cities, I mean, this means to address inequalities of access to services, basically, and to jobs. Okay? These are the two main issues. Okay? Now people are settling down in cities, in many places in what is usually known as slums, which has different names in different countries, but in informal settlements with, for the most of them, with no access to basic urban services and to social services. So I think that this would be the main things that all stakeholders, including governments, but not only governments, should address. I mean, cities are the place where a lot of actors, it's an arena for, I mean, it's a playing ground for many, many actors. I mean, private sectors, people living, governments, municipalities, etc. I mean, the world has changed. It's not, I mean, just a relationship between governments and citizens and people living. But there are many other actors that should be involved in the provision of, I mean, the success to the city for the people. These many other actors, among these many other actors, there are, of course, the local governments, which are key players, in my opinion, as they are responsible, I mean, for the management of the city. So this is one actor. So it's not just a game between the state, the government, and the people. It also involves the local governments. It also involves, I mean, the people who are living in these cities, which might organize themselves to be able to take part in the public debate, in the orientations that the city should take. Okay, so I mean, we have, it's also, I mean, we also have to work with the private sector. So the role of partnerships is to try and bring all these people together around kind of agreements to help, again, the city transform. The role of the think tank would be to develop a different narrative and a compelling narrative on what urbanization means in Africa. We have some contradictory positions, points of view, etc. on urbanization. Is it good, is it bad, etc. We do think that it's a good thing for the development of Africa, but if we respect certain conditions. Okay, it's not urbanization per se. I mean, it's urbanization which is an inclusive urbanization, which is important. And so the think tank should help the Cities Alliance to develop an argument on what does city mean and how can we better, focus on key issues for us to help these urbanization process to be an inclusive process and not an exclusive process. So the think tank is there to help us identify key issues and how to address these key issues. Okay, so it's gathering very high-level people, which has a long-standing experience on these issues, and would like to bring these minds together to help us define kind of a roadmap for us to better act in support of the desurbanization process in Africa. I think, as I told you, there are many challenges. The challenges of slums, the challenge of employment, the challenge of access to basic services, etc. I think we should, the point is try to transform these challenges into opportunities, okay? There are a lot of opportunities, there are a lot of creation. When you go to Accra, for instance, you go to the slum, one which is, they have been experiencing some very hard eviction problems, and now in one of the major slum of Accra. But when you go to this slum, you see, this is a vibrant city. This is a vibrant city. It's not, people are doing things, people are creative, people are very active. There's dynamics there, okay? So how do we build on these dynamics, to help the city transform? And not, trying to destroy these dynamics. How do we draw on what people are actually doing in the informal sector, which is a very, very active and vibrant sector? How do we consider this as a positive input in the city and not as something that should be eradicated and not that something that should be evicted? How do we build again on the active forces that made up the city? Okay, there are different levels of Pan-African organizations. You have Pan-African organization at the civil society level. SDI is one of them, the Slum Dwellers International Organization. So communities organizing themselves in their own countries, but exchanging views and trying to advocate for a better recognition of what organized people can do in support of city development. Okay, so this is one example. There's another level, which is the level of local governments, for instance. UCLGA, the United Cities and Local Government for Africa Association, is another Pan-African association of mayors and of association of cities, okay, who are also playing a leading role in advancing the decentralization agenda in Africa, we've been, for instance, publishing 2 years ago for the last Afro-City Summit a study on on the institutional environment of cities, and for cities to be able to act in Africa. I mean, in every country there's a set of legislative measures and regulations, etc. Is this enabling the cities to act or not? Okay, and to act properly or not? UCLGA, I mean, putting together with the support of the Cities Alliance these assessments of all 50 African countries. How is these environment? What is this environment in each one of these countries? And trying to rank the countries against a series of criteria. I mean, this helps. This helps in the sense that, I mean, some governments, some countries that see that they're, I mean, ranking very low, say, what's happening with me? No. And so there's kind of a competition which is created. And this is very useful. So, I mean, these kind of things happening is very important. And these can only happen at the continental level, okay? I mean, trying to bring some competition between countries in terms of what are they doing in support of decentralization, what are they doing in support of city development, etc. So the role of at the community level, at the local government level, but there's also at the government level. And the African Union is now, I mean, pretty much aware of the role of cities in development. And they have been working on setting up a special committee to deal with this urbanization process and what a government should do in support of this urbanization process. So at different levels, there's kind of an acknowledgement of informality is everywhere in Africa. Okay, informality in access to land, in access to services, in access to employment. I mean, many things are informal in Africa. The tendency of the political bodies when it comes to dealing with informality is either to, well, it's mostly to eradicate, okay? So there's what someone called the bulldozing approach to informality. I think we should try and find ways of drawing on what is positive there and to help, I mean, transform it and to consider this as a positive input, I mean, to Africa urbanization and to urban transition. Informality is not the evil, yeah? It's not the good, but we should find ways in taking into account that this is the reality. We shouldn't go against the reality. We should, I mean, try and support what is good in this reality. And again, this is a very active sector. I mean, in every kind of when you deal with housing, when you deal with access to land, access to services, I mean, there are people are having access to this because they need it to live. Okay, so how do we positively consider informality, not as a problem, but as a possible way of providing and what is needed to support what is happening to be more efficient, to be more effective. So, I mean, acknowledging the reality and not, I mean, saying that this doesn't exist. For instance, in many countries, slums are not in the map. Slums are not in the map, so it doesn't exist. Okay, but they're there. Okay, so how do we build on this? This is the point. How do we build on this? How we transform our viewpoint, saying that informality again is not a problem, but it is what's happening. So how do we support these processes for them to be more effective, and for them to chart a way forward towards what we want to be, efficient cities, inclusive cities, and providing living conditions, acceptable living conditions to all. Okay, my message to the participants in the upcoming AfriCities Summit is that cities are definitely the future of Africa, but not any city. The city we want, and the city I think you want, all of you, from governments, from community organizations, from local governments, is to build inclusive cities. I would say that you should be all involved in building partnerships, in opening platforms for dialogue and consultation, if you want to build these cities for all.